dude.
You can eat his own burger.
Why don't you eat it?
Try it. Eat it. Eat it.
An episode from season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants showed us that Krabby Patties were so good because each one was made with care and love, much like all of Nickelodeon's shows around that time. Well, just like SpongeBob, Nick is in its umpteenth season and hardly recognizable from what it used to be. Nick hasn't had an original idea in a good decade. Can they take a hint from their competition, or will they just double down on the 2 or 3 shows that they know will work? Maybe this whole time, SpongeBob SquarePants has just been a giant metaphor for Nickelodeon itself. To kind of follow up on my last video when I realized just how nonchalant Nick was with their old IPs, it seems that now I have even more beef with them. In recent Nick news, there has been the renewal of SpongeBob SquarePants for another season, which is a surprise to no one. But then there's the upcoming release of Nick's crossover fighting game, All-Star Brawl 2. All-Star Brawl 2 is a follow-up to the first All-Star Brawl to come out in 2021 to mixed reviews as a very obvious Super Smash Bros. Clone. Now everybody knows about the Super Smash Bros. Franchise. I've been playing it since it was on the N64. I'm no pro, but I'm pretty good. Well, in 2008, the super anticipated, universally acclaimed third installment of Smash Bros. Brawl came out for the Wii. Just a year later, Nick.com would come out with this new web game called Nickelodeon Super Brawl. Online computer games from the 2000s hold a lot of fond memories for me, but I purposely chose not to play the Nick.com games. If I recall, it was because Nick's games were too childish, and I guess Nick wanted more action games to draw in the kids who liked that kind of stuff. For that, I'd say Nick did a good job adapting to what kids wanted to play. But Super Brawl essentially was still just a ripoff of a much better game concept. Nick kept up this Super Brawl series, and it had a peak popularity between 2013 and 2015 with its third installment, Good vs. Evil. Well, guess what game also came out around this time? Smash Bros. For the Wii U and 3DS. In fact, this third Super Brawl game Nick did may have only been made because hype for the new Super Smash Bros. Game had started. From here, Nick would keep making Brawl clones until the website removed online games in 2018. They tried a mobile app version in 2019, and then now you have the 2 console games. Nick probably would have abandoned the idea after the online game removal, had it not been for actual Super Smash Bros. Hype. Smash Bros. Ultimate came out in 2018. Since Super Brawl World and Super Brawl Universe, Nick had started to include their greatest hits characters, and the main reasoning for this surely had to be connected to that late 2010s nostalgic reboot trend. Since the first All-Star Brawl, Nick has been hyping their crossover fighters mostly with their old characters from the 90s and 2000s. Last time, it was a big deal to include characters like Nigel Thornberry, Jimmy Neutron's dad, Ren and Stimpy, and even April O'Neil. All-Star Brawl 2 boasts having even more of their forgotten characters like the Angry Beavers, but unlike the Super Smash Bros. Roster, Nick doesn't seem to be making their roster any bigger. They're just kinda switching characters out, which to me shows a lack of dedication. If you're gonna rip off Smash Bros, then rip it off. Make your roster as big as possible. We don't know yet who's all gonna be in All-Star Brawl 2 yet though. So that's part of the hype, I guess. But you know one character who's never been switched out or uninvited from these Brawl games? SpongeBob. SpongeBob and Patrick are the only characters to appear in every one of Nick's Smash Bros. Clones. Nick has been playing favorite with SpongeBob for a long time, and they reminded us with this by renewing SpongeBob SquarePants for its 15th season, when technically its 14th season hasn't even started yet. I don't particularly care. SpongeBob could go for over 30 seasons, like The Simpsons if they want. The problem is that in general, season renewals are not being fairly distributed. If Nick truly cared about their older IPs, they would spread the wealth a little bit more. Yeah, they rebooted Rugrats and made a Hey Arnold movie, but where is it leading to? Nowhere. Nick only cares about these old shows because it's trendy and it's helping to sell their crossover fighting games. Now, there's nothing wrong with the crossover fighter. It's a fantastic video game genre, and Nintendo isn't the first one to tap into it, but they definitely helped it into the mainstream video game culture. And along with the mainstream video game culture comes the attention of the majority of the school-age demographic. So naturally, Nickelodeon would try to tap into this genre, but also Cartoon Network would try as well. They tried it in 2011 with Punch Time Explosion, but also, most recently, with Multiverses. Multiverses goes beyond Cartoon Network and uses characters from all over the Warner Brothers library. Compared to All-Star Brawl, Multiverses was awarded for being a much better fighting game, which is funny because the full version of Multiverses has yet to even come out. We've only seen the beta version. It just does a better job in doing what Nick was trying to do and following a popular trend, which in 2022 was the multiverse. Warner Brothers may not know how to use multiverse in a movie, but they sure seem to know how to use it in a video game. I'm sure with their new game, Nick has learned from their mistakes and made the mechanics even better. But with that first All-Star Brawl, Nick clearly wasn't taking this crossover fighting game too seriously, despite having made a half a dozen others. It's been giving, here's our crappy version of something popular, and we just want to hurry up and put it out so we can start making money from it, like Justice League 2017. But unlike Justice League 2017, Multiverses is a pretty big win for Warner Brothers. Nickelodeon could have made a better crossover fighting game from the beginning. They could have really leaned into that nostalgia factor and really brought back all those canceled characters one way or the other. But now we're seeing, after 5 years or so, that they have chosen not to. They pulled a bait and switch on us by making us believe they were about to reboot old shows like Hey Arnold, Invader Zim, and Rocko's Modern Life. But after a couple of new movies, nothing else happened. They even did this with the All That reboot, which at this point feels like a fever dream because they only brought it back for one season and then never mentioned it again. I mean, the mess and madness of 2020 had a hand in getting it canceled, but still, they faked us out. They either don't actually care about their old IPs or they just can't keep track of all of them. Well, having too many characters is definitely not an excuse because, well, just look at what Warner Brothers did, and they own way more characters. If you include the DC universe, Warner Brothers has an ocean of characters compared to the little inflatable swimming pool Nick might have. So outside of Nick just being lazy, they care more about having a very small circle of new original cartoons, having SpongeBob, and having the rights to already popular IPs like Ninja Turtles and Garfield. There is one particular IP that Nick seems to be putting in a lot of effort and careful preparation in with behind the scenes. Nickelodeon is in cahoots with Netflix as of 2018, and it was then that Netflix would announce they'd start producing a reimagined, live-action Avatar remake. About 2 years later, Avatar: The Last Airbender would get a huge boost in popularity after Netflix started streaming the series. Seems like Nickelodeon took this as confirmation that they definitely still had a golden IP and that they needed to make new material, but should tread lightly. In 2020, news came out that the Avatar creators themselves would have nothing to do with this live-action Netflix remake due to creative differences. But Nick was still very determined. In 2021, Viacom-CBS, Nick's boss, announced a whole new studio dedicated to Avatar and producing more animated Avatar content. Most recently, it was learned that Nickelodeon, through Paramount, were producing 3 animated Avatar films. Kinda like what James Cameron is doing, but his animation is probably going to be a little bit more complicated. But anyways, Nick and Netflix seem to be a perfect match for each other, because they both have been known to cancel a good thing. Avatar is one of the few exceptions to the rule. If the animated show doesn't have an appreciation and following that isn't super obvious, or maybe if just one of the executives don't like it, the show just doesn't seem to survive. Netflix has a lot of animated shows under it. It's actually pretty shocking how much they have streaming rights to. But the previous renewal season showed us that when it comes to their original programming, they will renew something dumb like Big Mouth, and then cancel something smart, like Inside Job. Both Netflix and Nick has fallen off in my opinion, to the point where they need to join forces. Netflix needs Avatar, and Nick needs Netflix. Nickelodeon's name simply doesn't hold the weight it did 20 years ago, and they really only have themselves to blame. They cherry pick which of their own properties to produce new material for, and leave all the others behind by canceling them and not airing them. And this nostalgia thing Nick does every now and then is not legitimate. It's one thing to roll with what's popular, but Nick will just make it obvious that they're just chasing a trend. There's really no excuse for how stingy this network is being with their IPs. It's not like Paramount or Viacom is canceling every new cartoon they make and locking the IPs away in a closet, like Warner Brothers is doing. Outside of Scooby-Doo, Warner Brothers has been keeping Cartoon Network's old properties away from even attempting a movie or a reboot, but they still managed to make a decent fighting game. So without Avatar and the aid of a major streaming studio like Netflix, renewing SpongeBob is the best that Nick can do. They're chasing nostalgia and crossover trends while struggling to make a video game with replay value. They're being fake. There's no love in these Krabby Patties anymore, and it's like they're just making regular hamburgers now. Am I being too harsh on Nick? I don't think so, because they've had plenty of time to adapt and show appreciation to their decades of fans, but they have simply chosen not to. Basically, what Cartoon Network and Nintendo will do to keep their legacy intact, Netflix and Nickelodeon will find a way not to do it. Like and subscribe for more random nostalgia and interesting coincidences surrounding said nostalgia, and I will see ya.